Explain to me the different types of structured notes and how you use those for your clients.
We personally use them with two main types of structured notes. And there's some other ones that are a little different than this, but the two main types we have are we call them income notes, which they work very similar to how a bond works. And then we have what are called growth notes, which work more like a growth stock vehicle, like an exchange traded fund, the S&P 500, or anything that's growth oriented that owns stocks. The income notes, they usually go between 1 and 5 years out. They have a maturity date. They have a defined amount you're going to make, just like a bond might give you 5 or 6% a year. These notes that we happen to use often pay high single digits to low double digits. Circumstances that are going on in the world and the markets and interest rates and all of that affect what the return is. Banks put them together, so we buy them through banks, and you name the big bank and they do it. Citibank, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, all the big banks across the world. And they will take, let's say, two or three indexes, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, and the NASDAQ. And they will use the volatility, like you were talking about. They are using these option contracts. They use the volatility and they will couple them together. They will say you can only make 10% in a year. Not only, it's still a lot, but you give away making 15 or 20 in a good year. And so in those years, that extra return, they use some of that as insurance to protect the downside. So a typical one might be tied to those three indexes. It's 5 years out. It pays 10% a year, and it will protect you on the downside as long as none of those three indexes in 5 years when they mature, if they don't go down more than 40%, if they go down 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or whatever, you get your money back. It's not a CD, but it has the same element of protection where your principal is protected as long as it doesn't go down more than that threshold of 40%. So when you look at it at face value and you step back and say, I'm only going to lose money if it's down more than 40%, the percentage likelihood of a stock index being that far down in 5 years is very, very, very low. There's only a few instances in the history of the stock market where that's happened.
Because that's a 5-year cumulative number, right? So it's a 5-year note, negative 35%. I mean, yes, we've had negative 35% years. Not even very many of those. I mean, it's happened to, I don't know, half a dozen times, a dozen times we've gone down that much in a 12-month
Not
period.
even. Yeah.
But 5 years, we're talking, Great Depression's the only one that we've had.
It's called it's the rolling, it's the point to point 5 years. You're 100% right. And we tell clients that, and we've seen it. We've been doing these notes for around 8 or 9 years now. And we've seen it in 2 or 3 instances where the stock market, COVID, stock market gets absolutely annihilated. It was a very short period of time and then bounces back. And that's what we've seen. Even if we go back to the tech bubble, which was almost 25 years ago now, we go back to 2008, the credit crisis. Even during those times when the markets were down they bounce soon thereafter because a lot of things are happening in the economy and businesses and the government's lowering interest rates, and all of a sudden good things happen and the market bounces. And so that's why these are fairly stable for the most part when you own them a little bit longer. So that's the first kind. That's the first type of structured note.
The statistical probability of it being down 35% is not your key risk consideration. You're thinking about the credit worthiness of the issue, or that's the ultimate thing, because there comes a point in time where in order for this scenario to happen, everything else around you is so bad that really is the least of your problem. Like, if the world ends, how will this portfolio do? And I'm like, terrible. There's not an answer to that, right? There becomes a scenario where if you're protecting against that, I got nothing for you.
Right. We run the math and use the logic, but to your point, we tell our clients as well, we cannot solve for Armageddon. and Armageddon is something that has, at the end of the day, there's an infinite number of risks that can happen. And so we want to put our best position to avoid what we do know and what we do see mathematically.